Hey guys, tonight is really a night you won't forget. Or maybe you will, because you'll be fast asleep before the gods even start squabbling. Imagine this, a golden sky over Mount Olympus, where the clouds drift like lazy sheep and the breeze smells faintly of ambrosia and thunder. Everything's perfect until someone forgets to send an invite to the goddess of discord. Oops. Classic mythological blunder. You are drifting now gently toward the most infamous wedding reception in mythical history, the union of Peleus and Thetis. The gods have gathered glittering in their divine awkwardness, sipping nectar, nibbling immortal olives. You're among them, invisible and quiet, just here to witness. You already sense trouble. Hera and Athena are exchanging glances, and Aphrodite is fixing her hair like she's about to win something. Suddenly, Eris, the goddess of discord, appears at the edge of the banquet. Not invited naturally. She doesn't scream or throw a tantrum. No, she does something far more elegant and catastrophic. She rolls a golden apple into the middle of the feast. Inscribed upon it are the delicate, shiny words, "To the fairest." And that's it. That's all it takes. In under 10 seconds, the mood shifts from divine chill to divine drama. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each step forward. Each one knows she is the fairest. Each one is definitely not about to back down. The gods murmur. Apollo pretends to be deeply interested in a grape. Dionysus grins and takes another sip of wine. Zeus, king of the gods, clears his throat with the authority of a god who wants no part in this. Let a mortal decide, he declares. You sigh. Even Zeus doesn't want to referee a goddess pageant. The mortal in question is Paris of Troy, technically a prince, but currently living in pastoral anonymity as a shepherd because of one tiny prophecy saying he'd bring about Troy's ruin. You know no pressure. Paris is summoned by Hermes and guided up the slopes of Mount Ida. He's probably wondering what he did to deserve this level of divine attention while trying not to trip in his sandals. Now you're beside him in the cool shade of an olive grove. The three goddesses appear before him, like a dream or a trap. First, Hera offers power, make him king of all men. Then Athena offers wisdom and victory in battle, the world's greatest warrior. And lastly, Aphrodite promises him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. You watch Paris's eyes glaze over, like he's picking a free trial he will absolutely regret. He chooses Aphrodite. Of course he does. Historians still argue whether Paris was genuinely seduced by the idea of love, or if he simply had a very limited imagination. One quirky theory suggests Paris just didn't trust Hera, not to ruin him later if he picked anyone else. And honestly fair. And so with the judgment complete, the goddesses vanish. Paris stands alone, golden apple in hand, blissfully unaware he's just launched the mythological version of a 10-season war drama. Back in Troy, life is still peaceful. King Priam sits on his throne, his many sons at his side. Hector, brave and noble. Deiphobus, crafty and proud. The walls of the city rise strong and sure, a crown upon the hill. But beneath it all, something stirs. The air is shifting. You follow Paris as he boards a ship bound for Sparta because Aphrodite promised him a prize. A living, breathing prize named Helen. Now here's your cheeky little reality check. None of this is going to end well. If you're looking for a fairy tale, you've boarded the wrong ship, my friend. But don't worry, it's all very sleepy. Don't forget to subscribe and share this channel with someone who loves soft bedtime stories. Tonight, let your mind drift along with us. And may this soothing story help you find the sweetest dreams. And hey, before you drift off, drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening. Or tell us how you're feeling right now. Maybe there's something weighing on you. You're not alone. This space is for you to feel safe, soft, and a little less tangled in the day. Maybe pull a blanket a little tighter around you. Listen to the quiet sounds of your room and prepare to drift peacefully into our tale. Paris sails and the sea is calm. But you know, storms never stay away for long. The sea breeze tousles your hair as you stand beside Paris on the deck of his creaking little ship, salt clinging to your lips and the wooden boards groaning beneath your feet. The sun dips lower, staining the Aegean waters with honeyed light as Sparta's coast comes into view. You arrive at the palace of Menelaus and Helen. It's grand, of course, in that ancient world way, polished stone floors, intricate tapestries that somehow haven't unraveled despite being woven by people who still thought thunder was personal, and servants who pretend not to notice the tension building like an impending thunderclap. Helen greets Paris. Her gaze lingers. There's a soft smile. Or is it something else? Historians still argue whether Helen went with Paris willingly or whether Aphrodite clouded her mind. Some say she fell in love, bewitched by the same magic that lured Paris into this ridiculous quest. Others whisper that she was abducted, her will stolen alongside her body. There's even a fringe theory that says it wasn't Helen at all, but a phantom made by the gods. If so, Paris fell for the world's first catfish. Either way, when Menelaus goes out of town, yes, he actually leaves the two lovers vanish. You can almost hear the clatter of angry sandals when he returns to find his wife and guest both gone. And just like that, one bad decision spirals into geopolitical disaster. Menelaus storms to his brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, and the closest thing Greece has to a corporate middle manager. Together, they call upon the old oaths sworn by Helen's former suitors, because when Helen was of marrying age, every eligible man in Greece had tried to win her hand. The clever Odysseus had even suggested all the suitors swear to defend the winning husband in case things got messy. Messy they got. Now messengers rush across the land reminding kings and princes of the promises they made during their youth. Some come willingly. Others, not so much, though. Odysseus, for instance, would rather not join the war. He's happily married to Penelope and already has a baby son. When the summons arrive, he pretends to be insane, ploughing a field with salt and acting like he's never seen a cow in his life. The Greek recruiters are clever, though. They place baby Telemachus in front of the plough. Odysseus veers away just in time, caught, drafted, off to war. Meanwhile, Achilles is hiding too, but for a different reason. His mother, the sea goddess Thetis, knows her son is fated to die young if he goes to Troy, so she hides him among the daughters of King Lycomedes, dressed in flowing robes and pretending to be a very tall, suspiciously muscular girl. Fringe tidbit, some say he even took to embroidery, gracefully. But Odysseus, ever the meddler, shows up with gifts, jewelry scarves, and one shiny sword. While the other girls squeal over gold, one of them picks up the blade. The jig is up. Achilles joins the war too. So here you are aboard another massive ship watching as a coalition of Greek Sacaeans, as they call themselves, gather at Aulis, a windy, grim stretch of coast. There's a problem though, the winds won't blow. The ships can't sail. The gods are silent. A prophet named Calchas steps forward, eyes narrowed, like he always knows something everyone else doesn't. He whispers the name of the goddess Artemis, insulted by Agamemnon. The solution: sacrifice his daughter Iphigenia. You freeze. Even in myth that feels heavy. Agamemnon lures his daughter to Aulis under the guise of marrying Achilles. She arrives bright-eyed and hopeful, only to be led to an altar. Here's where the story bends. Some versions say Iphigenia dies, the blade falling with divine indifference. Others say Artemis swoops in at the last moment, replacing the girl with a deer and whisking her away to serve as a priestess. Historians still argue whether the myth is meant to criticize kings, honor gods, or just give audiences emotional whiplash. Either way, the winds rise, the ships set sail. You sail now too across the gleaming waters, a fleet of 1,000 ships moving as one. The horizon swells with purpose and dread. Behind you, home vanishes. Ahead, destiny waits. 1,000 hulls crash against the surf. Warriors disembark, spears glint, shields thud against the shore. You step onto Trojan sand for the first time and feel the tremor of fate beneath your feet. You step into the bright, salt-burnished air of Sparta one last time, watching the echo of what Helen once was flicker across the empty palace halls. Her silken robes are gone. Her laugh is missing. And her husband Menelaus stands with clenched fists and hollow eyes, having returned home to find the queen of his heart whisked away by a Trojan prince with a shepherd's tan and a smug grin. Now you drift with the news as it spreads across the Aegean like wildfire. Helen is gone. Abducted, seduced, taken, spirited away, it depends who you ask. But either way, Greece is not going to let it slide. Menelaus's rage becomes fuel, and his brother Agamemnon, ever the opportunist, fans it into a campaign. Helen isn't just a wife anymore. She's a cause, a symbol, a banner under which kings and warriors can justify 10 years of bloodshed. But let's not forget, this is ancient Greece. Everything is politics, and everything is poetry. So Helen is recast as the face that launched 1,000 ships. That's the version the poets liked. Has a nice ring to it, though historians still argue whether it was truly about love or more about pride, economics, and long-standing beef between kingdoms. You watch as heralds thunder across the land, shouting names like Diomedes, Ajax, the great Nestor, and Idomeneus. One by one, the old oaths are honored, or at least negotiated. Old alliances reform. Rivalries are paused. War has a way of simplifying things. Back in Troy, King Priam's palace is buzzing. Priam is no fool. He sees the horizon clouding. His sons gather. Hector, noble and golden-hearted, speaks of honor. Paris, still brushing Helen's hair and pretending this was all totally worth it, insists love conquers all. The city prepares for a siege. Meanwhile, you shift quietly between both sides. You stroll through Mycenaean halls lined with armor and etched with blood oaths, then pass beneath Troy's high walls, where its people clutch at normalcy, planting herbs in clay pots, and hoping peace might yet prevail. Spoiler, it won't. Helen sits in her chamber, gazing out over the city she's doomed. She's impossibly beautiful, yes, but also unreadable. Does she regret her choice? Does she truly love Paris? Does she long for Menelaus, or simply for silence? Fringe theorists believe she intentionally fled Sparta, desperate to escape her role as a trophy wife. Others say she was cursed, her will bent by Aphrodite's divine meddling. Some even whisper Helen had the power to bend men to her will with her voice alone, a kind of mythic siren. Outside, the city's defenses are bolstered. The Trojans have allies: Dardanians, Lycians, Thracians, and the famed Amazons, fierce women warriors led by Queen Penthesilea. But we're not there yet. For now, you watch the warriors take their positions, training, polishing, waiting. The Greek armada finally arrives, sails snapping in the wind, like the flutter of distant wings. You see the shoreline blackened with soldiers, more than 100,000, by some later counts possibly exaggerated, but we're telling bedtime stories here, not tax reports. The Trojans line their walls. Priam watches with the weight of a lifetime behind his eyes. Hector lifts his spear. Paris stands near Helen, pretending he's not internally panicking. And somewhere in the mass of Greek warriors stands Achilles, tall, radiant, death-sculpted and youthful Achilles doesn't just walk, he moves like poetry. His armor glows unnaturally, a gift from the gods. He is fast, lethal, untouchable. Raised by Chiron, the centaur trained in both war and music, he is both hero and contradiction. His best friend, maybe more Patroclus, stands at his side steady and soft-eyed. Achilles has come not for Helen, not for oaths, but for glory. And that will make all the difference. Before the fighting truly begins, the Greeks send envoys to Troy, offering a peaceful resolution, return Helen, and avoid bloodshed. Priam listens. Paris pouts. Hector sighs. Helen watches silently. The answer is no. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was divine interference. But either way, Troy shuts its gates, and so the siege begins. The first assaults are chaotic. Clashes of bronze on bronze sand darkening with spilled hopes. But Troy holds. Its walls are too strong. The Greeks camp outside building huts, temples, even theatres. Because clearly they're going to be here a while. Night falls. Campfires burn. Songs rise to the stars. The war doesn't roar, yet it smoulders. You drift now through the sleepy murmur of surf brushing against hulls. Sails sighing in the wind, and warriors muttering curses as they load more amphorae of wine and salted fish. The great Greek fleet may have landed, but Troy isn't falling anytime soon. And so the war stretches not for days or weeks, but for years. 9 of them. 9 long, sun-bleached, dusty years. You settle beside the fire pits of the Greek camp, where tents are patched and armor is dented from more sparring than battle. The Greeks, you realize, are not actually very good at taking walled cities. They try, oh yes, they charge, they skirmish, they shout very impressive threats, but Troy remains standing. The walls built by Poseidon and Apollo or so, the myths claim, are absurdly tall and annoyingly indestructible. So the war becomes a waiting game. Between those rare major battles, it's mostly raids. The Greeks sack smaller Trojan allied towns, plundering grain, gold, livestock, and tragically people. Prisoners of war, especially women, become spoils. This, as you can guess, creates tension. Case in point, Chryseis and Briseis. Chryseis, daughter of a Trojan priest of Apollo, is taken by Agamemnon. Briseis, on the other hand, is claimed by Achilles. Both women are intelligent, dignified, and entirely too aware of the injustice of their fate. But when Chryseis' father pleads for her return and Agamemnon refuses, a plague strikes the Greek camp. A divine plague, the kind that melts your bones and turns victory into fever dreams. The Greeks beg Agamemnon to relent. He does, but then seizes Briseis from Achilles as compensation. And now Achilles sulks. No, really, he sulks. Like a teenager who just found out his Wi-Fi's been cut off. Achilles withdraws from battle. He refuses to fight. He just sits in his tent fuming, playing the lyre, composing deeply emotional poetry, and glaring at anyone who comes near. The Greek army loses morale. Without Achilles, they're less effective. The Trojans start winning small battles. Even Hector begins to smile. This is where the war becomes strange. God starts stepping in more directly. Athena disguises herself to meddle in duels. Apollo sends plagues and prophetic dreams. Hera and Zeus argue like exhausted parents in a road trip from hell. Zeus even weighs the fates of mortals on golden scales, dramatically deciding who gets to live another day. Historians still argue whether the gods' involvement is meant to represent fate nature, or just the Greeks projecting their inner chaos onto immortal soap operas. Fringe tidbit. A few scholars believe the whole war might have been a metaphor for a massive drought or economic collapse. Mythologized over time into something more glamorous. But let's not get too meta. You wander the Greek camp now, where soldiers sharpen blades beside games of dice and pine for home. Odysseus tells stories that are only half true, and Diomedes trains until his armor smells like cooked onions. Nestor, bless him, is still talking about that one time 50 years ago, when he single-handedly fought 100 pirates uphill both ways. He's very old, very wise, very long-winded. Meanwhile, in Troy, life continues. Strangely, markets reopen between skirmishes. Children play near fountains. Helen walks the palace gardens, her beauty both shield and prison. Paris struts around in polished armor, rarely fighting, often preening. Hector, real warrior that he is, handles most of the work. Hector isn't just Troy's greatest defender, he's its heart. He loves his people, fights with discipline, and doesn't particularly enjoy bloodshed. He's married to Andromache, and their baby son Astyanax toddles through palace corridors with a lion-shaped rattle. Troy, despite the siege, breathes. The Greek camp, meanwhile, festers. Tempers boil. The war is going nowhere fast, and without Achilles' morale is slipping like a sandal in wet clay. So naturally, Odysseus proposes a duel. Let Paris and Menelaus fight man to man. Winner takes Helen. War ends. It's a nice idea, clean, elegant, very theatrical. You blink and suddenly both men are in the field, glistening in the afternoon light, surrounded by tense silence. Paris, predictably, is not great at fighting. He's stylish. He's handsome. But when Menelaus grabs him by the helmet and starts dragging him like a shopping bag, you know it's over. And then poof. Paris vanishes. Aphrodite has seen enough. She snatches him out of danger, delivers him back to Helen's chambers, and probably reminds him not to touch anything sharp. The duel is void. The war continues. You sigh. Everyone sighs. Except Hera. She's furious. So she pressures Zeus into letting the Greeks strike hard again, and that's when Diomedes steps up. Oh, Diomedes. In a single day of glorious madness, Diomedes wounds Aphrodite, stabs Ares, yes, the god of war, and chases everyone around like a man possessed. He's so intense even the gods start avoiding him. His horse is literally frothing. The war is no longer about Helen. It's about pride, glory, anger, the kind of anger that keeps your muscles tense even as you drift into sleep. But don't worry, you're not in the war. You're just watching from the edge, gently rocking in the rhythm of a story that's too loud to end, but too old to stop. You wake gently into the clamor of morning in the Greek camp helmets, clinking whetstones, scraping the sharp scent of pine smoke, sweat, and wet bronze. The war is back on, and it's just as petty as ever. Achilles still sulking. You find him sitting beneath his tent-awning legs, stretched out hair, freshly braided, plucking lazily at his lyre, like he's auditioning for a tragic poetry slam. He refuses to fight. Agamemnon's insult cut too deep. And when Achilles sulks, it isn't just personal, it's national security. The entire Greek front line is wobbling without its golden boy. Still, the war machine rolls forward. Leaders like Diomedes, Ajax the Greater, and Odysseus take charge, driving the Trojans back by inches. Every skirmish is a swirl of sand, glinting spear points, and desperate grunts. But nothing changes, nothing breaks. Until a curious moment arrives, a truce. A temporary one, but a real pause. They use it to burn the dead milestones in memory and somehow host athletic games. Yes, Olympic style. Javelin tosses, chariot races, even a foot race around the camp where someone inevitably trips over a turtle. You sit in the stands beside Nestor, the ancient Greek Gandalf, who won't stop narrating every single event with a story from his youth. Fringe tidbit. Some scholars think Homer inserted these games into the Iliad as a nod to real funeral games held during Mycenaean times, blending myth with memory. But beneath the cheering and the mead, tension builds. Agamemnon knows he's messed up. His pride cost him Achilles. So now, awkwardly, he tries to fix it. He sends a group of envoys, Odysseus, Ajax, and Phoenix, to Achilles' tent. They bear gifts, gold, horses, even the promise to return Briseis untouched. They say all the right things. And Achilles listens. Kind of. He doesn't scream. He doesn't throw anyone into a ditch. But he also doesn't say yes. His pride still smoulders. Let the Greeks burn, he says quietly, and then maybe they'll remember who I am. You walk with the envoys back to the camp. Their faces are stiff like men who know they just failed a very important quest. The wind picks up. Somewhere far off, a Trojan horn sounds. The next day the Trojans push hard. Hector leads them like a tide. The Greeks are slowly, agonizingly forced back toward their ships. Yes, their ships. Those precious vessels moored on the shore like sleeping beasts become the final line of defense. You move through the panic. Greeks scramble to hold the line. Arrows rain down. Dust swirls like smoke. And then amid the chaos comes Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion, perhaps a brother in arms. Perhaps something more can't bear to watch the Greeks fall. He pleads with Achilles, let him wear the famed armor. Let him lead the Myrmidons. Let him make the Trojans believe Achilles has returned. Achilles hesitates, but he agrees with conditions. Don't chase them to the walls, he says. Scare them. Turn the tide. Then return. Patroclus nods. You help him into Achilles' armor, every piece glowing in the dawn light. The Myrmidons cheer. Their leader rides out cloaked in borrowed glory. At first the trick works perfectly. The Trojans panic. They see the armor. They think he's back. Hector's men falter. The Greeks rally. It feels for a moment like victory, but Patroclus forgets the warning. He drives forward, heart-thudding blades flashing right to the gates of Troy. And that's where Hector meets him. The duel is quick, too quick. Hector, noble and ruthless, cuts Patroclus down. The young warrior falls, whispering Achilles' name as he fades into the dust. You feel the silence ripple back through the battlefield. Even the gods seem to hold their breath. Back in the camp, Achilles is still at the shore, staring at the sea when the news comes. He doesn't weep, not at first. He simply stands, still, empty, as if the world just lost its color. Then the rage comes. Achilles doesn't walk. He erupts. His cry splits the sky. He vows vengeance. He vows death. And now, he will fight again. He calls upon his mother Thetis, who rises from the sea foam like grief given form. She comforts him, then commissions Hephaestus, god of the forge, to make new armor. And oh, what armor! A shield that glows with the whole world carved onto its face, cities, stars, fields, peace, war, laughter, and silence. The breastplate gleams like lightning caught in metal. The helmet sings with its own wind. Achilles wears it, and the war changes tone. The Greeks see hope again. The Trojans feel dread. And you stand at the edge, the surf lapping at your toes, knowing the storm is just beginning. You are standing in the eerie quiet before a storm, not of rain, but of bronze fury and vengeance. The sea is calm, but the air crackles with something heavy and ancient. Achilles has returned. You walk beside him now as he moves through the Greek camp, like a blade in human form. The Myrmidons cheer, banging their spears against their shields. Even the birds seem to fly a little wider around him. He does not stop to eat or sleep or braid his hair this time. This isn't about glory anymore. This is grief on fire. You can smell it like olive oil left too long over a flame. And so Achilles returns to the battlefield. The gods themselves lean closer. Athena, ever his silent champion, hovers above. Poseidon rumbles beneath. Even Zeus watches with narrowed eyes, weighing Achilles' fate on his golden scale. You feel it the moment his feet hit the field. The Trojans hesitate. Hector stiffens. The war becomes something else. Achilles doesn't fight like the others. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't just kill, he dismantles. Men scatter. Chariots tip. Dust churns around him like a cloak of fury. It's said the river Scamander grows thick with bodies. And eventually, the river god himself begs Achilles to stop choking his waters with corpses. A god, begging. Achilles relents eventually, but barely. He's not here to make peace with nature. He's here for Hector. And Hector knows it. You walk beside Hector now, pacing the walls of Troy. He is calm. He knows he cannot avoid the fight. He kisses Andromache. He cradles his son Astyanax, who reaches for his father's helmet and cries when the plume brushes his cheek. A moment soft as milk and honey, one that will live in poetry long after blood has dried. Historians still argue whether Hector truly believed he could win, or whether he simply knew he must try. Down below, Achilles waits. You join the crowd lining the walls. The Trojans hold their breath. The Greeks murmur. Even the wind seems to hush, and then Hector appears. The duel is slow at first, circling, testing, bronze glinting in the afternoon sun. But Hector is tired, his limbs heavy from too many days of war. Achilles is fresh, burning with a fire that nothing can quench. Eventually, Hector breaks. He runs. 3 times around the walls of Troy, they go chariots chasing like comets around a doomed star. Hector's family watches horror in their eyes. Finally, the gods intervene. Athena disguise tricks Hector into turning and facing Achilles. And then, like thunder, Achilles strikes. The blow is brutal, fast, final. You hear the crack of bronze on bone. Hector falls. He begs not for his life, but for his body. Return me to my family, he pleads. Let them bury me. Achilles refuses. Here's where the myths get dark. Achilles ties Hector's body to the back of his chariot and drags him around the walls of Troy. Once, twice, 3 times. Dust fills your eyes. Gasps ripple through the city. Even the gods turn their faces. It's not justice, it's rage. And yet the grief isn't soothed. Not really. Achilles returns to camp with Hector's mangled body in tow, and Patroclus is still gone. The armor glows, the shield shines, but inside Achilles is hollowed out. That night Troy is a city of weeping. Priam, old frail but still a king, does the unthinkable. He rides into the Greek camp, alone, unarmed. You're with him now, every footstep uncertain, every breath steeped in courage. He finds Achilles. He kneels. And he says, I have done what no man before me has dared. I have kissed the hand of the man who killed my son. And Achilles, for the first time, in what feels like a century, softens. He weeps. The gods weep. You might too. Achilles returns Hector's body, not for gold, not for glory, but because in that moment both men are simply fathers grieving sons, heroes wrapped in flesh. A truce is called for Hector's funeral. You walk behind the procession. The pyre is massive, piled high with fragrant wood and silks. The flames climb into the sky, sending sparks like stars into the night. For a few quiet days, there is no war. Just memory, just ash, just silence. You awaken to the scent of charred cedar and rosemary. What's left of Hector's funeral pyre now drifts across the plains of Troy like morning smoke. The truce has ended, of course. These brief moments of peace never last long in stories like this. Achilles, though, he's different now. You walk beside him barefoot through the dew-wet grass, his armor dark with ash and emotion. Patroclus is buried, but not gone. Hector is gone but not forgotten. Achilles has done what he came to do, vengeance, glory, and fury all sated. And yet there's a hollowness clinging to him now heavier than his shield. He no longer joins the feasts. He no longer plays his lyre. His heart is adrift, and yet he's still a force of nature. The Trojans barely dare leave their walls now. Without Hector, their spirit frays. They mourn, they worry, and deep within the city, Paris begins to stir, the man who started it all. Helen's soft-voiced suitor, the one who chose lust over wisdom, is now being pushed toward a new destiny. You watch him from the palace balcony, gilded in regret. He's no Hector, but he's still a prince. And now the gods have decided it's his turn to shine or fall. Enter Philoctetes. Here's your quirky detour. Remember Heracles' big guy, lion skin club, dramatic exits. Well, when Heracles died, he gifted his bow and arrows tipped with hydra poison to a young Greek named Philoctetes. Great stuff, very epic. Except Philoctetes was abandoned on an island after a snake bit his foot, and it started smelling. Awful. Like, please leave the camp, awful. So the Greeks left him behind at Lemnos 10 years ago. But now a prophecy whispers through the battlefield. Troy cannot fall without the bow of Heracles. Cue Odysseus. Again, you journey with him and Neoptolemus Achilles' son. Yes, somehow already grown up enough for war because ancient myth timelines are loose like bedtime logic. They sail to Lemnos, find poor festering Philoctetes, and through a mixture of lies, guilt, and heartfelt apologies convince him to return. The bow arrives. Paris, now inexplicably motivated, leads an assault. His target Achilles. It's messy, rapid, and drenched in divine interference. You watch from the dunes as Achilles slices through Trojan ranks, his new armor shining like a storm god. And then it happens. An arrow flies. Not just any arrow. Apollo guides it. It finds Achilles' heel, the one spot left unguarded. When Thetis dipped her baby boy into the river Styx, holding him by the ankle like a sack of sacred potatoes. The great hero falls. Not in fire, not in glory, but in pain, in silence. You hear the thud of his body on the sand. The Greek camp is paralyzed. You sit by the shoreline as his men carry his body away, their chants soft and ragged. The myrmidons shave their heads. The sky clouds. Even the sea goes still. The funeral is vast. A pyre as tall as memory. A feast full of silence. And then, the armor. Who gets it, Odysseus or Ajax the Greater? Both claim they deserve it. Odysseus, clever, silver-tongued essential. Ajax, strong, loyal, never once wavered. The Greeks choose Odysseus because brains beat biceps. And Ajax he breaks. You follow him into the shadows as his pride fractures. In some versions he kills himself, falling on his sword ashamed. In others the gods strike him mad, and he slaughters a herd of sheep, thinking they're Greek leaders. When he awakens and sees the carnage, he cannot bear the shame. Another hero lost, another name fading into myth. Historians still argue whether these stories reflect real warrior psychology, or whether they're mythic metaphors for what we now call PTSD. Either way, the message is clear. War breaks more than it builds. And yet the Greeks push forward. Helen from her tower watches the tides turn. She writes no letters. She weeps without sound. Whether she prays for Menelaus or Paris, or simply peace, you'll never know. The war is thinning now. Heroes die. New faces rise. The gods begin to retreat. Odysseus, ever restless, starts crafting something made of wood, something large. You see it begin to take shape, timber groaning under the weight of history. The end is coming. But for now, sleep beside the smouldering embers of fallen warriors. Feel the hush of the battlefield after loss. The stars shine like pinpricks in dark velvet. and somewhere in the shadows the wind whispers a name, Achilles. The night air grows colder, now settling into your bones like old sorrow. You sit atop Troy's mighty walls, gazing down at the field where Hector once stood, where Achilles fell, where Ajax collapsed under the weight of his own silence. The war feels quieter now. Not over, just quieter. Like a fire that still glows but no longer roars. Inside the city, the mood has shifted. Hector is gone, and with him, the soul of Troy. His absence is a hole no one dares to fill. Paris now walks with the posture of a man who knows the gods once favored him and may never do so again. He polishes his armor with trembling fingers. He looks at Helen with longing, but she's unreadable as ever, her thoughts buried behind eyes too tired to dream. You drift through the palace halls, catching snippets of conversations. Old counselors speak of escape routes. Queen Hecuba burns offerings to gods who no longer reply, and somewhere near the courtyard, little Astyanax plays with a wooden lion, unaware that he will soon become a symbol carved into the most tragic verses of ancient poetry. Outside the walls, the Greek camp has taken on a different rhythm. Fewer warriors remain now. Time has thinned the ranks. Some died in glory, others in sleep, others just slipped away, their names never remembered. Even the gods once loud and meddlesome have started to withdraw. Olympus feels far away, and yet Odysseus still plots. You watch him late at night, seated near the dying embers of a fire, sketching plans into the dirt with a stick. He's whispering to Epius, a quiet builder from Phocis. Together they design a trick. Not a battle, a story. A trap wrapped in wood and hope. The Trojan horse. Now you've probably heard about it before. But being here, seeing it rise plank by creaking plank is different. It's not elegant. It's not even realistic. It's huge. It creaks. It leaks. It looks like it could tip over in a strong breeze. But it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to work. And it will. Historians still argue whether there ever was a real wooden horse, or whether this was a metaphor for siege engines' bribery or disease. A few fringe theorists even think it might have been a ship, mistranslated over centuries. But here in this tale, the horse is very, very real, and very hollow. You crawl inside it now, stepping carefully over beams and ropes. Odysseus is already in place, along with a handful of the best Greek warriors. Their breaths are shallow, their blades are sharp. They carry no torches, just silence. Outside, the rest of the Greek army begins a performance for the ages. Ships are burned or hidden behind a nearby island depending on who's telling it. Tents are packed, dust is stirred. It looks like a full retreat. The Trojans, seeing the empty beach, begin to cheer. They come pouring out of the gates, at first cautiously, then in waves. There's dancing, singing. A few of the younger soldiers start playing catch with Greek helmets like they're toys. You can't help but smile even knowing what's coming. And then they find it, the horse. Massive, mysterious, glorious. Laocoon, a Trojan priest, is the first to speak sense. He eyes the gift with a frown and famously declares, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts." Good advice, rarely followed. To prove his point, Laocoon hurls a spear at the horse. It thuds, the wood shakes, and somewhere inside you swear you hear armor clink. The crowd hesitates. Then something terrible happens. Two serpents, enormous and slithering like nightmares with teeth, rise from the sea. They wrap themselves around Laocoon and his two sons, crushing and biting until all three lie broken and still. The crowd screams. Some say the gods sent the serpents, Poseidon perhaps still bitter over Troy's refusal to pay him for building the walls. Others say it was a coincidence, but the message is clear. Laocoon was wrong. The horse is divine, a gift, a blessing. So the Trojans open the gates. They drag the wooden beast inside wheels, groaning its giant head, tilting toward the stars, like it's watching. There's music that night, wine, firelight. Troy sings as though the war never happened. Children dance around the horse. Helen, watching from her tower, doesn't smile. And deep within the belly of the wooden beast, you wait. Odysseus doesn't speak. No one does. You can feel every heartbeat, every muscle held still. The air smells of wood sweat and patience. Outside the fires burn low. Inside swords gleam. The city sleeps. But not for long. You lie in the cramped belly of the horse, the air thick with the breath of warriors who do not move, do not speak, do not even blink. Every creak of the wood feels like thunder in your ears. Outside the city of Troy slumbers beneath a star-scattered sky, blissfully unaware of the blade nestled at his heart. The fires in the courtyards burn low. You can hear the echo of laughter tapering off as wine fades into sleep. For a moment the city feels alive again, whole, hopeful. The war they believe is over. The Greeks are gone. Helen might even be forgiven. But you and those inside this beast of timber know better. And then the signal. You feel the thud first, then another, then a faint grinding as the belly of the horse splits open with slow, deliberate care. A rope drops down. One by one, shadows slide out. Odysseus is the first to touch the earth, landing soft as a whisper. Others follow silent, swift, deadly. You climb out last just in time to see Odysseus nod toward the city gates. Elsewhere, sign on the Greek left behind disguised as a defector has already unlocked the outer gates. By the sea, the hidden ships return under the cover of night oars, slicing through black water like scalpels. Now the gates of Troy are open, and the Greeks pour in. It happens so fast, so dreamlike that you almost don't realize it's real. One moment the streets are silent, the next filled with the clatter of sandals and the ring of bronze. You slip through the chaos, watching homes shatter like pottery. The Greeks fan out in all directions. Torches light the city like dawn made of fire. You pass by a baker's stall, still holding fresh loaves. A clay jug spills wine across the stones. A dog barks once, then vanishes. You think of all the years, all the hopes that lived in these walls, and now it is all falling. In the palace, Priam is roused by the sound of death. The old king, white-haired and bewildered, takes refuge at the altar of Zeus in the central courtyard. He clutches the knees of a statue, pleading for mercy. His wife Hector trembles behind him. His daughters weep. But mercy does not come. Neoptolemus, Achilles' son, bursts in like a storm made flesh. He sees Priam. He sees the symbol of everything Troy stood for, and he raises his blade. Priam dies there at the feet of the gods in a sacred space where blood was never meant to fall. Historians still argue if this scene was real or added later by dramatists looking for poetic symmetry. Either way, it became legend, a king once mighty slaughtered on his knees while his city burned. Elsewhere, Helen wakes. She hears the screams, the crackle of fire, the clang of steel. She moves through the palace like a ghost, untouched, for reasons no one can quite explain. And then Menelaus finds her. Yes, him. Her husband. Her captor. Her salvation. He enters her chamber, sword drawn. His face is fury and heartbreak. He looks upon the woman who started this war, who became its excuse, and lifts his weapon. But it never falls. Some say she bared her breast and spoke his name, and he dropped the blade. Some say he simply saw her again, and love or weakness clouded his judgment. Fringe accounts claim Aphrodite stood behind her, whispering illusions into his ear. Whatever the reason, Helen lives, You find yourself watching as she walks out of Troy clothed in soot and silence beside the man she once left behind. Some cheer, others curse, but no one touches her, no one dares. Elsewhere in the city, another horror unfolds. Andromache, Hector's widow, is seized with her child Astyanax. The Greeks fear the boy will grow into vengeance. A prince of Troy left alive could one day raise armies, so they decide he cannot live. The baby is torn from her arms and thrown from the walls. You don't see it, but you hear it. The world stops for a second. Even the fires dim. Andromache falls to her knees. She does not scream. She simply folds inward, a woman broken beyond the reach of words. You drift now through Troy's final moments. A temple burns. A horse lies dead in the square. A woman clutches a harp with no strings. A soldier picks through a library of scrolls, drops them, and lights them on fire. The dawn is pink, unforgivably soft. Troy is gone. And the Greeks. They don't celebrate. Not really. They loot. They burn. They count their dead and whisper of omens. For none of them feel victorious. Not truly. Not after this. And you sit atop the city wall, smoke curling past your shoulders, and look out toward the sea. The war is over, but no one is coming home the same. The fires crackle behind you now, 1,000 tiny tongues devouring memory and marble. You descend the crumbled steps of Troy's walls, your sandals brushing ash where rose petals once fell during wedding festivals. The smell is a mix of cedar and charred olive oil, sacred oils and smouldering linen. Troy, once proud, once golden, is now a skeleton, glowing in the last gasp of twilight. And still, there are things left to do. You follow Odysseus through the hollowed streets, past broken gates and temples with ceilings half caved in. His face is grim, calculating alert. He's done what no siege could. He broke a city with a story. But instead of satisfaction, he wears the look of a man who knows that cleverness and blood rarely part on friendly terms. The Greeks begin dividing the spoils. Women are claimed as slaves. Children vanish into silence. Statues are defaced not for strategy, but out of habit. You watch Menelaus place a possessive hand on Helen's shoulder. She does not flinch, but she does not meet his eyes either. Theirs is a reunion made of smoke and shadow. You drift into the temple of Athena, what's left of it. Inside, warriors stand frozen. Ajax the Lesser has just done something unspeakable. He has dragged Cassandra, daughter of Priam, from the altar. She had fled there for sanctuary, hair tangled, eyes wide, robes torn, clutching the statue of the goddess. But Ajax ignored sacred ground. He pulled her from the altar, took her, and now the statue of Athena falls. Stone crashes onto the floor, a divine symbol shattered. Every soldier present flinches, even Odysseus goes pale. Because desecrating a temple, that's not just impiety, that's invitation. An invitation for every god left on Olympus to reach down and curse your soul into next week. Historians still argue whether this particular act of sacrilege was original to the myth or layered on by later poets desperate to justify why the victors of Troy would suffer so dearly afterward. Fringe theory. Some say Ajax was later cursed not by Athena alone, but by Poseidon as well, turning his ship to flotsam beneath a vengeful sea. You leave the temple before the air becomes too heavy to breathe. Outside, the Greek generals gather. They stand amid smoke and rubble, surrounded by spoils and ghostlight, and begin discussing division, how to split the gold, the armor, the captives. Agamemnon takes Cassandra. Menelaus reclaims Helen. Odysseus accepts a share of relics and ivory but says little. He's already thinking about Ithaca, about Penelope, about how long it will take to get home. Spoiler, it'll be a while. You pass Neoptolemus Achilles' son, who stands over the grave of Priam, breathing through clenched teeth. His armor is too clean, his eyes too old. The Greek ships are being reloaded now. Wagons creak with plunder. Masts rise into the ashen morning. But the winds, still. You step onto the docks watching the horizon. No breeze, just thick, unnatural stillness. The priests say it's the gods, specifically Athena. You can almost hear her voice, distant and rumbling, hissing from marble lips. You broke sacred ground. You spilled blood at my altar. You dragged the prophetess from my arms. And now, there is a price. The Greeks try everything. Sacrifices, prayers, rituals. Nothing moves. Until Calchas, the prophet, steps forward again, blinking against the rising heat. There is only one way, he says. Appease her. Find what was taken. Return what was broken. But they don't really know how. So they sail anyway, sullen, reluctant, hoping Athena will look the other way. She doesn't. One ship sinks before it clears the bay. Another burns mid-journey. Agamemnon's voyage will end in murder. Menelaus will wander for years. Ajax the Lesser, struck by lightning, tossed into the sea, or devoured by Poseidon's wrath, depending on which version helps you sleep better. You see it all beginning the unraveling. The fall of Troy was only half the story. The homecomings will be worse. But for now, in this moment, the Greeks still stand. You walk through the empty courtyards once more. A single lyre string twangs in the wind. A goblet lies tipped on a step, its wine soaking into marble. A torch flickers out. Troy is silent. Not just defeated, but erased. And as the sun rises over the ruins, it doesn't warm. It watches. Because cities don't die in fire. They die in forgetting. You stand at the edge of the smouldering city, watching the Greek ships prepare to leave. They creak and groan under the weight of plundered, gold-looted weapons and the broken hearts of the conquered. The sails flap in the sluggish wind, their fabrics stained with smoke from Troy's final breath. But amid the clamour and loading and shouted commands, one man is missing. Odysseus. You turn back, drifting among half-toppled columns and charred fig trees, until you find him seated beside the wooden frame of the Trojan horse, now abandoned like a shed snakeskin. His face is blank, his hands idle. He's staring at it like it might still whisper secrets. You already know what he's thinking. Cleverness wins the war, but does cleverness survive peace? He won the city, yes. His plan worked. The stories will remember that. But what comes after isn't as clean. Home is far. The gods are restless. And something deep in his bones tells him this victory carries a cost he hasn't yet calculated. You join him as he rises. No fanfare, no victory speech. Just a man walking back to his ship, trying not to look behind him. On the other side of the ruins, Priam's daughter Cassandra walks in silence. Taken by Agamemnon as a spoil of war, her gift of prophecy, once a curse, still burns behind her eyes. She sees what's coming. She sees the dagger, the queen's fury, the blood in the bathtub. But no one listens. No one ever listens to Cassandra. Fringe tidbit. Some say her prophecies weren't just about Mycenae or the fall of kings, but visions of foreign shores, distant futures, and empires not yet born. One version has her whispering of Rome before Rome had walls. Back at the ships, a different sort of conversation unfolds. The Greeks are arguing again, this time about sacrifices, wines, and omens, because the sea, once their path to glory, has become strange. The tides pull sideways. The sky is too still, and the birds are flying in confused spirals like even they aren't sure which way is home. Then comes the omen no one wanted. A serpent slithers up the mast of one ship, coils itself around a dove's nest, and swallows the chick's whole. Calchas watches. His eyes darken. We have angered the gods, he murmurs. Again. Historians still argue whether these omens were real, or later flourishes added to dress the raw horror of war in divine drama. Either way, the Greeks believe it. And belief, after all, is what makes omens dangerous. You drift now with the departing fleet. The winds finally rise, but not kindly. Thunder hisses across the horizon. Waves turn bitter. The ships split like leaves in a storm. Some are swallowed whole. Some are tossed to strange shores. Some, like Menelaus's, are blown all the way to Egypt, where Helen pretends to be someone else entirely, and the war becomes little more than a bedtime story told to local children. Others, like Agamemnon's, make it home only to find betrayal waiting with a knife. But Odysseus, he does not return. Not yet. He drifts for 10 years more, pulled by monsters and storms, and the memory of a woman weaving by candlelight. You float with him briefly through the wine-dark sea, past islands that sing, past giants who eat men like walnuts, past whirlpools and witches, and the ache of wanting to believe that home is still where you left it. But let's stay with Troy a little longer, because there's one more story left behind. Aeneas. Yes, you've seen him before, always in the background. A prince, a cousin of Hector, too small to lead the defense, too strong to die quietly. During the chaos, as the Greeks set fire to the gates and tore down the temples, he carried his father on his back and led a small band of survivors out through the secret gates. You walk with him now, his son at his side, his eyes full of ash and destiny. He doesn't speak much, but he doesn't have to. He's been given a new story, not one of war, but of foundation. They say he sailed west, that he would one day plant the seeds of an empire greater than Troy, that through him the blood of fallen heroes would live again in Rome. Another story, another myth. But myths are funny things, aren't they? They die and live and die again, reshaped by whoever dares to remember them. Troy falls, Rome rises, and in between a boat, a boy, and a fire that refuses to go out. The sea mists begin to rise behind the fleet now, like a curtain finally drawing over a play that ran too long and cost too much. You don't look back. No one does. Behind you lies Troy, broken, burning, and echoing with songs that will outlive everyone who sang them. You sail on, but not all of you. Tonight we follow one who doesn't sail away at all. Back in the ruins of the city, ashes swirling like grey snow, a whisper still clings to the temple steps. A whisper in the form of a priest. Laocoon, remember him, the one who warned the Trojans about the horse, the one who threw a spear and was punished with serpents. Tonight you remember him. His voice is long gone, swallowed by the sea. But the fear he planted lingers. Some say his ghost still paces the beach, murmuring to broken shields and the skeletons of spears. I told you so, he mutters, not triumphantly, but as a man who would give anything to be wrong. You follow the breeze now toward another temple, this one partially intact. A few columns remain standing. Ivy snakes up its battered frame. And in the courtyard, Cassandra kneels, hands tied, eyes open, speaking truths no one dares write down. She is aboard Agamemnon's ship now, in chains, but not in silence. She sees his return to Mycenae. She sees his wife Clytemnestra standing in the threshold with a red carpet and a silver smile. She sees the bath, the blade, the betrayal. She sees her own end murdered beside the man who dragged her from the altar. You want to shout. You want to shake the Greeks awake, tell them the gods have not forgotten. But you can't, because you're only watching. A passive presence in a world that barrels forward on wheels carved from prophecy and pride. Meanwhile, Helen sails quietly beside Menelaus. No chains, no bindings, just silence. No one speaks to her. No one dares. Some believe she cast a spell. Others say she's Aphrodite's puppet, a doll carved from moonlight and sin. But the truth, she's just a woman, now older, exhausted, untouched by fire, but scorched from within. Her eyes never rest. Her hand never unclenches. And Menelaus, he keeps one eye on the horizon and one on her, unsure whether he brought home a wife or a storm. You drift along the deck of another ship, one caught in the wrong wind. Ajax the Lesser, no relation to the greater Ajax who died with honor, is facing justice from the sky itself. Remember what he did. He tore Cassandra from Athena's altar. He violated sanctuary, and now the gods have decided to collect. Poseidon, usually gruff and vengeful, summons a storm that splits the heavens. The sea heaves like a wounded creature. Lightning cracks white and endless. A wave as tall as a mountain crashes down. The ship shatters. Men scream. Boards splinter. Ajax clings to a jagged rock near the coast. For a moment, it seems he might survive. But then Poseidon sees him standing tall, bragging that he escaped without divine help. The sea answers. The rock splits. The ocean rises. And Ajax is pulled under his hubris, sealing his fate. Historians still argue if this myth was a warning about impiety, arrogance, or simply an elegant way to rid the tale of an unpleasant character. Fringe theories suggest the tale was borrowed from earlier sea myths and retrofitted into Trojan lore. Either way, he's gone. The gods grow quiet again, but their silence is uneasy. You walk now with Neoptolemus, Achilles' son, as he leads Trojan captives toward his father's tomb. There he makes sacrifices, burns incense, and whispers promises he may not understand. He's a boy with a hero's armor and a killer's hands, but he's also a son. And when he kneels beside the pyre, he doesn't speak of glory. He speaks of longing, of missing the man he never really knew, of wondering whether the blood on his blade was his or just something he inherited. Then there's Odysseus, still aboard his black-sailed ship, looking toward a home that seems further away each hour. He studies the horizon like it might change if he stares hard enough. He thinks of Penelope weaving and unweaving stories, of Telemachus growing taller without him, of monsters yet to meet, of gods yet to forgive. And as the sea rises beneath him, as Ithaca becomes a myth in his own mind, he wonders whether cleverness is a gift or a curse. You leave them there, scattered across the sea, victors made hollow, survivors tied to ship masts and broken dreams. You return to the ruins of Troy one last time. The fires are out. The wind is still. A lone lyre string vibrates in the breeze. And in the dust just visible are footsteps walking away Aeneas and his son, and an old man too tired to cry. They do not look back, because they too have stories to start. You find yourself once more inside Troy, but not the golden city of 10 years ago. This Troy is dimmed, cracked, echoing with ghosts. The fire has moved on, the swords have dulled, but the silence remains. You drift past broken altars and toppled gods through the doorways of homes that once bustled with laughter and perfume, now home only to dust and old wind. Night falls again, not just upon the city, but within the story itself. Because now we turn to the last night, the final breath, the moment when hope didn't just fade but fled. You are there in the heart of the hollow horse before it opened, the moment before betrayal. Inside the wooden beast, the Greek warriors barely breathe. Odysseus presses his back against the beams, one hand clutching his dagger, the other steadying a younger soldier trembling in the dark. The air is thick with sweat, with prayers muttered silently, with the creak of knees and the trembling of a history about to turn. And outside the city glows. Trojans dance by torchlight, spinning in circles around the very weapon that will end them. Children play at the base of the horses' legs, laughing as their shadows dance against the beast's belly. A priest offers libations. A nobleman tells a joke. Paris kisses Helen's hand, and for just a moment she smiles. The city thinks it has won. It hasn't. You move forward in time now, past the laughter, past the singing, to the hour when the last ember fades, and the first snore curls out beneath a flickering torch. The moon overhead is half blind. A dog barks once, then curls against the base of a pillar, and then the trapdoor opens. One by one, the Greeks descend into a sleeping city. The guards are dead before they even stand. The gates creak open. Torches are lit, not in celebration, but in silence. From the shore, more Greeks pour in like ink across parchment, and the city begins to burn. You wander the courtyards watching as homes are set ablaze from the inside out. Bronze blades flash. Gold vessels shatter. You pass by a boy hiding beneath a table. He doesn't breathe. You pass a woman clutching a baby, her body curled around him like armor. You step into the palace. Halls once filled with music now echo only with hurried footsteps and shouted orders. Priam's throne room is desecrated not for strategy, but because someone couldn't resist the symbolism. A tapestry of the city's founding is torn in half and used to bind a prisoner's hands. You see the Greek commanders spread through the corridors like wolves. Agamemnon moves with grim purpose. Menelaus searches for Helen. Odysseus checks doorways like he's walking through a dream he wrote himself. And Neoptolemus, he's already in the temple, the sacred sanctuary, where Andromache hides with her child Astyanax, the son of Hector. Here is the moment that has haunted artists and poets for centuries. The moment where mercy might have lived but didn't. Neoptolemus, trained by war, raised in vengeance, looks at the boy. He sees a future prince, a symbol, a spark that could reignite Troy. He does not hesitate. You don't see it happen. The myth is kind enough to close the door. But you hear the cry, a mother's cry, a child's final breath, and the silence that follows, a silence deeper than the sea. Outside the temple of Athena collapses. It has stood for generations. It falls in minutes, whether by fire or thunder or simply the refusal of the goddess to watch any longer, no one knows. But it crumbles, and with it the last pillar of old Troy. Cassandra, dragged from the altar days before, walks through the ash barefoot. She looks at the ruins and nods once she knew. She always knew. You return to Helen now. She stands in her chamber, untouched, unbothered eyes fixed on the horizon. Menelaus bursts in sword drawn. For a moment everything stops. The man who crossed oceans to find her, the woman who sparked a war with her beauty, husband and wife, stranger and stranger. Some versions say he raised the sword. Others say she dropped her robe. Still others say she spoke his name the way she used to, and that was enough. Whatever happened, he did not strike. Instead, he led her out of the city, past the corpses, the fire, the horse. She walked with him like a queen, or a ghost. Historians still argue whether she was a victim, a witch, a pawn, or a woman caught in the ambitions of gods and men alike. Fringe theories suggest Helen wasn't in Troy at all, but in Egypt, meaning everything that burned was for a shadow. But shadows can still burn cities, and this one did. You take one last lap through Troy, this time walking with the dawn. The bodies are still. The fires flicker out. The horse, now half-burned, creaks one last time, then falls. Troy is not falling. Troy is fallen. and in its place only silence. The dawn spills over the blackened horizon, like wine poured too slowly. You step quietly through the bones of Troy, where the air still tastes of smoke and history. There's a calm now, but it isn't peace. It's the hush that follows something terrible, the kind of quiet that wraps itself around your chest like a weight. In the broken temple courtyard, King Priam lies still. He doesn't look like a king anymore, just a man old, and spent his white beard matted with ash, his blood dark against the altar stones. His body is where Neoptolemus left it, at the feet of Zeus's statue. A statement, a warning, a kind of punctuation mark. You walk past the splintered columns, your sandals crunching over bits of ivory and shattered votive offerings. The temple roof has collapsed. Golden halos of morning light cut through the wreckage. They fall cruelly on another figure. Polyxena, Priam's daughter, Hector's sister. Just a girl, she is being dragged by the wrist now toward the tomb of Achilles. The Greeks claim she's a sacrifice, a final offering to the shade of the hero who bled so brightly in his short life. Others whisper she refused to be a slave and demanded death instead. The scene unfolds in slow, unbearable motion. She doesn't scream. She doesn't beg. Her eyes are dry. She stands tall, her hair tangled and her robe torn, but she is not broken. A platform has been built atop Achilles' burial mound. You climb with her, the sun rising behind you, casting your shadow long and trembling. The Greeks circle below. Neoptolemus waits at the top, sword in hand, uncertain, perhaps even shaken. But she does not flinch. She kneels, not to beg but in dignity. And when the blade comes down, you turn your head, not to look away, but because no part of you wants to remember the sound. Her body falls beside Achilles' grave, and something in the wind exhales. Even the Greeks are silent. You return to the palace now, or what's left of it. Inside, Hecuba, once queen of Troy, sits among the ashes of her lineage. Her husband is dead. Her sons are dead. Her daughters stolen or slain. Andromache has been taken. Cassandra too. There is nothing left. She speaks to no one. Or perhaps to the gods. Perhaps to you. She rocks slightly, her fingers threading the hem of her scorched gown, as though she can sew the past back together if she keeps moving. Historians still argue whether Hecuba's story ends here or continues in madness. Some say she was turned into a dog by the gods howling at ships that sailed too slow. Others say she died screaming on the shore. And some believe she simply sat down and never stood again. You step outside once more. The wind has shifted. The Greek camp is breaking down now. The spoils divided. The ships loaded. Odysseus is counting heads. Agamemnon is silent. Menelaus stands beside Helen, his hand loosely around her wrist, as if afraid she might vanish into the smoke. Helen looks out across the city. Her face shows no joy, no sadness, just understanding. She walks slowly through what used to be her second home, past the balcony, where she first watched Paris practice archery, past the steps where Trojan girls braided her hair in the golden light of 100 safe mornings. Every eye follows her. No one stops her. In time, she boards the ship with Menelaus, and Troy watches her go. The gods are quiet now. They've played their games, cast their dice, whispered into ears and stolen fates. Even Zeus seems distant, perhaps bored, perhaps disappointed, perhaps already thinking about the next mortal foolish enough to matter. As you make your final path through the city, you pass a young scribe scratching something into a shard of pottery. He's etching the names of the dead, carefully, with a cracked stylus and steady hands. He will not finish, but he tries. And then you hear it, a single child crying from beneath a broken cart. A Greek soldier finds him. He pauses. There is a silence between them, brief, fragile. The man lifts the child and walks away. You hope for once it's towards something kind. You return to the steps of the ruined palace, watching as the sun lifts fully over the Aegean, casting the rubble in gold. You wonder, how long before this place is forgotten? How long before vines grow where princes fell, before some shepherd stumbles across the stone foundations and calls it just another hill Troy is over? But stories echo. They bend, they bloom. They burn quietly in minds long after the fire has gone out. You walk now beneath the jagged archways of Troy's ruin, the rising sun painting the smoke in streaks of gold and orange, as if the city refuses to die without first being beautiful one last time. You follow the steps down into what was once the royal quarter mosaics, cracked columns leaning like exhausted sentinels and soot clinging to everything like an old betrayal. And there, in the inner chamber, Helen sits alone. Her gown is grey with ash. Her hair, once combed by palace handmaidens, hangs loose. She runs her fingers along a fallen statue's cheek, maybe Aphrodite's, maybe hers. The lines are broken. The smile has vanished. But the likeness is haunting. You remember the face that launched 1,000 ships. And now it waits in silence for judgment. Menelaus enters. His armor is singed. His sword is drawn. This is the moment the story has been crawling toward. Husband and wife, betrayer and betrayed, lover and liar. He has searched 10 years for this encounter, and here she is, not in a tower, not wrapped in illusion, but seated on the floor waiting. She rises slowly. There are no guards, no witnesses, just two people standing inside the broken heart of a kingdom. She speaks first, not with apologies, not with pleas, but with her name spoken like a question. Menelaus. He grips the sword tighter. It trembles in his hand. She doesn't step back. She doesn't flinch. She simply meets his eyes and lifts her chin. Historians still argue what happened next. Some say she opened her robe, exposed her breast, and said, "Would you strike the woman you once loved?" Some say Menelaus saw her and remembered the mornings in Sparta, the touch of her fingers, the sound of her voice wrapped in warm linen. Others say the gods clouded his mind, covering her with Aphrodite's glamour to make her irresistible once more. And the fringe theory, that he did strike her lightly across the face and then collapsed into her arms, weeping, neither of them able to tell whether they were mourning or returning. But the result is always the same. Helen lives. You follow them as they walk through the ruined streets. The Greeks turn their heads. Some avert their gaze. Others mutter behind their palms. No one stops them. She does not apologize. She does not smile. She just leaves. As they near the ships, Helen glances back once. You catch it, a flicker of something. Regret, relief, recognition. Maybe she's saying goodbye to Troy. Or maybe she knows this won't be the last city to fall because of her. Menelaus helps her aboard without a word. The sail lifts, the oars creak, the ship begins to glide. And just like that, Helen returns to Greece, not as a queen, not as a prize, but as a myth made flesh. Back in the ruins, the sun climbs higher. You return to the palace one last time. Hecuba sits where you left her, unmoving. A soldier arrives. He doesn't speak. He gestures. Andromache, Hector's widow, is brought forward, shackled but unbowed. Her hands tremble, but her back is straight. She walks with the dignity of someone who has nothing left to lose. She and Hecuba lock eyes. Something passes between them, shared pain maybe, or just the dry numbness of survivors. The Greeks tell them they'll be taken to different ships, assigned different fates. Andromache, to serve a foreign household. Hecuba, No one says. She's old. She'll either be ignored or broken. The women do not protest. They simply go. You linger behind them, watching their footsteps vanish into the sand. All that remains is memory. And one more face. You find Paris beneath a scorched awning, already fading into legend. He was struck by Philoctetes, remember him? The man left behind with the stinking foot, and the bow of Heracles, yes. That bow finally found its mark. Paris crawled home begging his former lover, the nymph Oenone, to heal him. She refused. Spurned long ago, she turned away as he gasped for breath. By the time she relented, it was too late. He died quietly, forgotten even by the gods who once fought over him. You walk the halls he once decorated for Helen, the gardens where he first offered her fruit, all overgrown now, vines cracking the marble, statues blackened by flame. The man who judged the goddesses now lies beneath rubble, and yet his decision changed the world. You pass a broken harp, a torn veil, a sandal, and suddenly you realize this is how myth survives, in fragments, in questions, in objects whose stories you only half remember. The war is over, but the weight of it still falling. The ships are nearly gone now. You stand at the edge of the sea, the foam lapping over rocks, and bits of scorched pottery watching the last of the sails vanish toward the hazy curve of the horizon. Troy behind you, a smear of ash against the morning light. Ahead of you, home, or at least what's left of it, in the minds of the Greeks. But this isn't a return for anyone. Not really. You follow the fleet as it scatters. The gods are not finished, not with them, not with you. Menelaus's ships drift toward Egypt, blown far from Sparta by winds that whisper too many names. Helen sits beside him, wrapped in silence, her face like a statue carved from frost and memory. Locals stare. They know the stories. They've heard of the war fought for her. She walks through their marketplaces like a goddess or a curse. No one touches her. No one calls her queen. Menelaus stares at her when he thinks she's not looking, trying to find the woman he once knew, wondering if she was ever real at all. Back in Mycenae, Agamemnon finally returns home. The gates are wide, the torches lit, the wine already poured. Clytemnestra waits at the top of the palace steps dressed in crimson. She smiles. She kisses him. She invites him to bathe, to rest, to celebrate the conquest. You already know. You follow him through the palace corridors deeper into shadows that smell like oil and iron. He enters the tub. He reclines. And then the net. She throws it over him, tangling his limbs. And Aegisthus, her lover, strikes. The blade is quick, but not kind. Agamemnon dies bleeding into hot water just as Cassandra predicted. She dies too, moments later, her eyes still wide, her mouth still forming a warning no one ever heeded. Historians still argue whether this murder was personal revenge, Clytemnestra, avenging the sacrifice of their daughter Iphigenia, or political justice. Fringe theorists even claim it was the gods' final punishment for the sack of Troy delivered through a wife's steady hand. Either way, the king is dead. You pass through Ithaca next. Odysseus, you'll find, is nowhere near it. His ship has drifted too far, tossed by Poseidon's grudge. He'll meet Cyclopes, sirens, witches, and ghosts before he ever sees home again. He'll lose his men, his ship, and nearly himself. But that's another story. Tonight you stay with those who remain behind. In Troy. The wind moves differently through the ruins now. Not in gusts or howls, but in whispers. You walk through the city's skeleton, the streets where children once chased each other through the market, where bakers shouted prices and musicians played for weddings. And now there is only one sound, the gentle sweep of ashes across stone. Andromache lives. Taken as a slave by Neoptolemus, she will bear him a son. But she will never again laugh freely, Her hands, once adorned with rings and spices, will scrub foreign floors. Her voice, once bright with poetry, will be quiet, but not gone. Because women like her, women of fire and fibre, keep memory alive when cities fall. Hecuba too will survive, if you can call it that. Some say she was turned into a howling dog, roaming the shores until the tide swallowed her. Others say she leapt into the sea willingly, her grief too heavy for skin to carry. A few believe she wandered into exile, nameless, faceless, just another widow in a world full of them. You find one last survivor in the dust, Antenor, one of Troy's elders. He argued for peace. He begged Priam to return Helen to make amends to prevent war. He was ignored. Now he plants a fig tree among the ruins. A small one, bent, but green. Because sometimes, even after a fire, something still grows. Aeneas by now is far away. You follow him briefly through Thrace, through Carthage, through storms and dreams, and a love that will end in flames. He carries the past on his back, his father's bones in a casket, and the future inside his son. They say he will found a city, not for revenge, not for glory, but to remember. A city named Rome, built not on pride but on survival. You sit beside the remains of Troy's western gate watching the stone crumble. A lizard skitters over a piece of Hector's shield. A bird lands in a charred olive tree and sings like nothing ever happened. Troy is gone, but not forgotten. The world will rebuild, and every time it does, it will whisper this name Troy as a warning, a lullaby, a legend. You return now to the edges of memory where time folds like cloth, and the ruins of Troy soften under layers of legend. The flames are out, the ships are gone. But the story isn't quite finished. Troy lies still beneath you, a quiet place, now bones tucked beneath layers of soil-scorched walls slowly sinking back into the earth. You pass a broken gate where a wildflower grows defiantly between two stones. You almost smile. There is no one left to bury the dead. No one left to retell the names of the boys who fell first at the shoreline. The ones without titles, without gods to protect them. You wonder if their mothers ever knew. If someone back in Thessaly or Phocis still sets a place at the table hoping. You pass by a spear still stuck in the ground, its shaft blackened, its bronze head green with weather. You can barely remember who threw it, or who it struck. And that's the cruelty of war, isn't it? The forgetting. Only a few names survive. Achilles, Hector, Helen, but most vanish like smoke at dawn. You follow a different wind now, a softer one. It carries you inland toward a grove just beyond the city's edge. There, hidden among the olive trees, a few children survived. Not many. Not ones with noble names. Just a cluster of orphans overlooked in the chaos. Their eyes are large, their laughter brittle. One of them finds an old lyre, strings it with horsehair and plays. The notes are clumsy but true. And you realize this is how stories begin again. Not with scrolls or kings, but with children trying to remember the songs. Far across the sea in Sparta, Helen walks through palace corridors that feel smaller than she remembered. The gardens are too quiet, the roses too red. She touches things carefully now, like everything might break. The servants watch her. They don't smile. Menelaus keeps her close, not out of love, but out of necessity. She's still beautiful, still famous. And that fame keeps his rule secure, but their words to each other are brief, formal, like reading lines from a play they've forgotten how to perform. Sometimes she stands on the balcony at night, looking east. No one asks what she sees. Fringe theorists argue she was never punished because the Greeks saw her as a symbol, not a person. A useful story. Others believe Menelaus couldn't kill her because in the end, he loved the idea of her too much to destroy the reality. Either way, Helen survives, and in survival, she becomes myth. Meanwhile, the gods go silent. Olympus is quiet now, its halls echoing with the last shouts of a game played too long. Zeus reclines bored again. Athena sharpens her spear, still fuming over the temple defilement. Aphrodite combs her hair, humming the lullaby of a 10-year war she sparked with a wink. They will move on, find new mortals, start new dramas. But Troy is different. It becomes legend. You walk with the first poets now, old men with bad knees and good memories telling tales to children around low fires. The city of Priam becomes something more than stone and ash. It becomes a caution, a wonder, a bedtime warning whispered in the dark. Be brave like Hector. Don't trust a wooden gift. Never anger the gods. One poet, a blind man named Homer, they say gathers fragments of memory and turns them into verse. His words roll like thunder across generations. He doesn't write them down, not yet. He speaks them, and others remember. You drift through his voice now, see the ships, hear the clash, smell the sea, feel the sorrow. The war is reborn, not with swords, but syllables, and this time no one dies. You walk back to Troy alone now. The dust settles around your feet like the hem of a robe. A breeze rustles through a collapsed colonnade. Somewhere nearby, a fox slinks through a vine-choked alley. The city is quiet, but never silent, because as long as the story is told, as long as someone whispers it before sleep, Troy will rise again. Not in stone, but in dreams. The story draws near its end, but not like a door closing, more like a candle guttering before it fades. You step softly now, each footfall a page in a book you've nearly finished, and Troy's broken streets stretch out behind you like the final lines of a fading poem. There's little left to see and less left to take. But before the last whisper dies, you pass once more through the echoes of the fallen. Here, this was the marketplace, once buzzing with spice sellers and fresh figs. Now only charred crates and rusted coins lie beneath drifts of wind-blown dust. There the training yard, where Hector once spun his spear and Paris loosed arrows into bales of straw with a smirk. A cracked amphora rests nearby, its glaze flaked away, but the lion motif still stares boldly from its side. Memory clings hardest to things that were once ordinary. Andromache's loom is overturned near the palace steps. A single golden earring glints beside it. You pick it up, feel the chill of metal that once pressed against warm skin, and set it gently back down. There is a reverence to ruins, one that demands you tread with more silence than sorrow. Down by the sea, the last of the Greek sails has vanished. They've taken with them their victory, their spoils, their curses, but they've also left something behind, themselves, because no one who walked these halls, who fought on these plains, who lit the pyres and sang the dirges, ever truly returned the same. Odysseus still lost, Agamemnon murdered, Menelaus bitter, even the nameless archers, the charioteers, the torch-bearers. They carry the weight of Troy in their bones, whether they admit it or not. You pause now, beside the remnants of the Scaean gate. It yawns open, like a forgotten mouth, the path beyond it, half swallowed by weeds and cracked paving stones. Once this gate welcomed traders from the sea. Then it became a shield against war. Now it is just an opening to nowhere. And yet you linger. Because through that gate walked Aeneas, bearing his father on his shoulders, his son clutched at his side. Through that gate passed the last heartbeat of Troy, slipping into exile, into myth, into destiny. Rome is centuries away, but the seed has already been scattered. And now, the city exhales, no longer in flame, no longer in chaos, only in memory. Troy is gone, but not erased. Its name will pass from mouth to mouth, across firesides, into scrolls, into libraries, into stars. Scholars will debate its location. Tourists will search its stones. Poets will sigh over its tragedy. Children will whisper it like a spell before sleep. Because some stories aren't told to be understood. They're told to be felt. And you have felt this one. You've walked the wall, sat beside heroes, listened to the gods, and watched it all fall piece by glorious, terrible piece. You step outside the last wall. Behind you, Troy. Before you, the gentle open road of dreams. So let it rest now. Let the spears drop from tired hands. Let the ships drift home beneath kinder skies. Let Helen close her eyes without judgment. Let Hector run again through Elysian fields. Let the city sleep. Let you sleep. And now, as the embers of Troy flicker and fade, let your breath slow. Let your thoughts soften like waves retreating across a quiet shore. You've come so far. You've walked through ancient cities, heard the clash of bronze, seen the glow of divine fire reflected in mortal eyes. You've listened to the sorrow of kings and the laughter of gods. You've stood among heroes and watched the sky turn red with myth. But that's over now. The last ship has sailed. The last song has been sung. The voices that once shouted across the plains have gone still, and in their place, silence. Soft, sacred silence. Let that silence carry you. Feel it wrap gently around your shoulders like a well-worn cloak. Listen to the hush in your room, the soft rhythm of your breath, the creak of the ceiling, the hum of the world still spinning far beyond these walls. Let it all fade now. The battles, the drama, the gods and their games, set them down beside you like old armor. You don't need them anymore, not tonight. Tonight you rest. Tonight your thoughts drift not to burning cities, but to quiet meadows, to cool streams, to places where time moves slower and stars wait patiently for your gaze. You are safe. You are held. You are not alone. And if dreams come, let them be kind. Let them carry the sweetness of quiet victory, the peace after storms, the stillness that only comes after stories are told. Sleep now. Let your eyelids fall. Let your mind untangle. Let Troy slip into memory and you into the softest, deepest rest.